Another season is upon us. Freshmen arrive wide-eyed with dreams of future glory, while seniors prepare for their last chance at immortality. There are only a handful of these opportunities in a man's life, a handful of chances to distinguish yourself from the rest. It's on these fields where history is made, where legends begin and heroes triumph. Traditions tell the story of what you represent, of those that forge the legacy you uphold. When you come charging out of the tunnel, 100,000 people will be watching your every move. How you respond to that pressure is what defines you. These are the moments that reveal your toughness, your determination, and your pride. The Roughnecks on the Sooner Schooner. Ralphie charging out of the gate. And Chief Osceola planting his spear. The time has come. Your time is now.
You know, I sat back and thought about what was the biggest problem that we face right now in college football, and it wasn't the NIL. It wasn't the movement that we see in the transfer portal. It isn't even the lack of direction that we have from top level leadership. It's actually a much more existential threat to the sport than anything else right now, and that's got to be the Saturday fall wedding. When I'm commissioner of college football, we're going to make sure that Saturday fall wedding is removed permanently so that we as college football fans, we can enjoy ourselves in peace during the fall season. But for right now, before we can get ourselves to that position where we could be the commissioner of college football, we will enjoy tonight's show where we jump in on a beautiful night here in the Midwestern part of the country. And a little bit of bittersweet moment for me. This is the last time that we are going to do kind of like the pre-spring previews that we've been doing throughout the month of March and into April as well. Final conference night. We are jumping into the Big 12, and it used to be the People's Conference. It used to be the de facto chaos conference. Is that changing? Is the landscape of this Big 12 changing from a top to bottom? What's some other storylines that we're going to keep an eye on as well? That and more is coming up here tonight, so hopefully you guys get your favorite beverage, get your favorite snack, do what you got to do, because we are talking to Big 12 tonight. No record prediction yet. I'm going to save that conversation for when I do my individual team breakdowns as part of the Spring First Look series that is ongoing here on YouTube, and you see some of that going on Twitter as well. But if you are excited for tonight's show, regardless, talking some Big 12 football, I hope you guys are as well, man, because I am certainly ecstatic about the opportunity to talk about the People's Conference here tonight. And if you guys are as well, I need you to do a couple things for it real fast. Hit that like button, then also hit that subscribe button as well. If you do happen to be brand new to the channel, it takes a lot of work, to make sure that this operation happens as cleanly as possible, as well as making sure that, like y'all, we out here having a good old time as well. So doing those two things really helps the brother out. I would truly appreciate it. And it's really interesting to see if we still consider this the People's Conference, because I think as soon as like 2 years ago, when we did see the new look Big 12, after all the additions and subtractions have happened, where you go ahead and you get yourself going here on the YouTube channel, or not on the YouTube channel, sorry, train of thought. After you see like a Utah and there's Arizona State join, as well as Colorado coming back to the Big 12 ultimately as well. On top of all of those things, and then you also see what went down with Oklahoma and Texas leaving. In spite of all of that, what I will say about this conference is that it's still a very good conference. So like at the same time, right? So very excited for for all of that, to go down, but now that we've seen this conference kind of lay itself out over the last couple of years, I think we are starting to see some differences between haves and have-nots. We saw what Texas Tech did last year. It seemed like they dominated just about everyone. One exception being the Arizona State game, where they did end up losing, but that was with a backup quarterback as well. They end up dominating in the Big 12 championship game. Even a BYU and a Utah, are they starting to separate themselves out as well a little bit, in spite of the fact that they did not have, a very late change at the quarterback position with Jake Redsoff going to Tulane because of some things that happened at BYU. Bear Bachmeyer takes over, and then all of a sudden, it's still a really good football team that almost made a college football playoff. And in most years, I think we would see that 11-1 BYU team. I think they're starting to separate themselves a little bit. And then I thought Utah was also on the precipice as well. But the precipice of Utah, losing a Kyle Whittingham, and you get Morgan Scully, who was waiting in the wings, but Morgan Scully is probably not going to run his program the exact same way as what you're going to see a quintessential maybe like how Whittingham does things. So I'm intrigued by Utah as well. And then even the bottom of this conference, as we got one of my co-hosts joining in, my man Colton. How you doing tonight, my guy?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear, man. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Sorry it's late notice. I didn't think I would, have the time, but I'm just drifting down the road. Singing sad old country songs. So I figured I might as well hop in, listen to what the CEO has to say about the Big 12. That's what it is today, right? The Big 12.
Yeah, yes, sir. We got the Big 12 tonight, as the title suggests. And I'm curious to hear some of your thoughts as well about the Big 12. Even though I know the ranking graphic's gonna look a little different, I'm sure you're gonna grill me on some of my rankings. But hey, we're here for it, and it's good to have a co-host here with me. Even though I can't be blessed with a beautiful face, but I definitely understand you're probably driving right now. We don't need to see any of that.
No, I would never drive and talk. No.
No,
I am travel. I'm a traveler. That's what they say, right? I'm traveling.
Just
Doesn't count.
Outstanding citizen, that completely follows everything to the law as intended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I unfortunately don't have my list in front of me. If I had time today, I would have got something out and would have at least sent it to you so you could go over it. But I'm just gonna sit back and I'm gonna do the easy work. I'm just gonna make fun of you. Yeah. I'm gonna do the easy. I got the back seat today.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how this Big 12 continues to unfold, because as recently as a couple of years ago, I mean, we considered this the pure chaos conference, but I think that's shifting because we're starting to see maybe a little bit more haves and have-nots. And I'm just curious, before we jump into my personal rankings for the Big 12, if that's something similar that you're seeing, or are we still considering this the de facto chaos conference?
No, I would definitely say it's leaning more towards the ACC as of recently, especially last year with Duke at 7-5, making the conference title game, winning the conference. I think the Big 12 is carving out more established programs that are aligning themselves with the top of the conference year in and year out. Texas Tech obviously is one of those teams. They just burst on the scene last year. It looks like they're going to be a mainstay atop the conference. Arizona State, they had a down year last year, but I feel like they're another team that's probably going to be towards the conference year in and year out. You saw Matt Campbell before he left, had Iowa State and that same kind of thing. So there are definitely a lot of great coaching staffs in the Big 12. They are establishing themselves in this landscape. They're not going to get as much love as the Big 10 or the SEC. And whether you think that's just or unjust, they at least have carved out their spot. And I think in the coming years, we're going to see a lot more Big 12 teams kind of bubble up towards that.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly going to continue as we get to a point where I think NIL is certainly benefiting the Texas Techs of the world. And that oil money is really coming into fruition, particularly with the type of roster they're able to put together. And I'm BYU and Utah there in their own right. They're putting together some good NIL programs themselves that's going to allow them to maybe push themselves up to a higher level as a program too. So, I mean, they're certainly carving themselves out. Yes, they were a one big lead last year, but I think we're going to eventually get to a point where we are going to see the Big 12 become a multi-big league as these programs continue to elevate in this NIL era.
Yeah, for sure. And you brought up a good one that I didn't even think of. Utah. Utah is another team. I know they also just lost their coach, but they're a team that has proven that they can be up there. I know 2024 they didn't have a great year, but they bounced back last year, showed they still have what it takes. And there's other teams that float around. TCU could be in that mix with Sonny Dykes. He's done. I mean, they went to the national championship a few years ago, so they're another one of those teams that can be towards the top year in and year out.
Yeah, and beat a very good Michigan team in the process too, might I add. I know they like to everyone likes to roast on TCU for getting absolutely destroyed in the national championship game, but for that to happen, they had to go and win a playoff game, which that was exactly what TCU did as well. People tend to forget about that aspect of their playoff run, and Max Dutton, like that was a fun team too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So, hey, man, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the big board that we're going to see for most of the night. So, a little bit different from how we've been doing things. This is my personal Big 12 rankings. And Colton has the opportunity to roast me on all of these. I will say I'm not going to go as deep as how I normally would. I'm going to save some of that deeper analysis for when I do those individual first looks of all 138 FBS teams. None of these teams have been revealed from a national ranking perspective. So that will lead to some deeper conversations down the line, as well as a record prediction. It's going to come in those videos as well. So no ranking prediction here. This is just how I think each of the Big 12 teams rack and stack from a power ranking perspective. It's not how I think teams are going to finish in the conference. So with that being said, man, you ready to grill me on these Big 12 rankings like here tonight, my man?
I mean, we'll see. I don't. Maybe I'll agree with everything you say. Who knows?
Yeah. So I think the first one is it's going to be. I'm curious to hear what you think, and I'm going to be curious to hear what the audience thinks as well. And for number 16, it actually really hurts me to do this because I actually really enjoyed watching this program over the past few years. At the start, I actually have Iowa State at the bottom. This team and this program was absolutely crushed in the transfer portal this year. They lost a lot of star talent when Matt Campbell took his talents to Happy Valley to coach up this Penn State football team. And it's not just Rocco Beck, also losing a lot of other key pieces like Chase Soul, Benjamin Brahmer, Caleb Bacon. They lost a lot of star players. And then just looking at what they backfilled on the other end, they brought in some intriguing players. Jalen Rayner at Iowa State, that's someone that intrigues me. Amari Hayes, the Twain wide receiver, also intrigues me as well. There's intriguing pieces here, but they lost a lot of star power. They didn't really bring any stars in on the back end. So I look at Iowa State as one of those teams that's probably going to be the least talented team going into this season. Now, do I think they finish last in the conference? Absolutely not. I think they're going to win themselves a few games because I think there's still elements of Matt Campbell's program that are still here. But I think Iowa State at the same time has the most work to do as we see the spring and summer camp continue to unfold right before our eyes.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. I definitely see where you're coming from. I would be interested to see where a couple other teams are, but I will get to that obviously. But I am not sold. Like you said, the roster undergoes a complete overhaul. They don't blow us away in terms of transfer portal talent that they brought in. And on top of that, Jimmy Rogers coming in Washington State did a pretty solid job at Washington State prior to obviously making the jump to Iowa State. Did keep them afloat in kind of, a strange year for them with Jake Dickert leaving and taking the Wake Forest job. But in terms of making that jump to the Power Four in the Big 12, I'm not completely sold on him. I don't want to say he's a bad coach, obviously, because I don't believe that. I think he could be very, very good, but it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, you spent a year at one school, did an okay job, and now you're instantly having to overhaul a roster. You're having to make a lot of decisions that maybe aren't ideal when jumping to the Power Four level. So I could definitely see where you're coming from on that one.
Yeah, so and I didn't even mention Jimmy Rogers, but I mean, you hit it on the head as well there. I thought he did a good job at Washington State. I didn't think he did a great job. He kind of left a little bit of meat on the bones in terms of how they finish in certain one score games. 7-6 is certainly not a bad record at all. That's a solid year, but I mean, it certainly could have been better as well. But hey, we'll go ahead and keep it going here with my number 15 team that I have going on. And this is probably one of the more talked about teams in all of college football. That is actually going to be the Colorado Buffaloes, which I do think is one of the more improved teams in the country. I like the portal approach that they did end up having this year. Instead of going the route of going for maybe power conference players that haven't really proven themselves at the collegiate level, instead going for players that have production. And they did lose some pieces, Amarian Miller and Jordan Seaton is a big one. That is a once in a lifetime like offensive tackle in the college ranks. That's going to be tough to replace alongside DJ McKinney, who transfers to Notre Dame. But I mean, they also brought in some really good pieces. DeAndre Moore from Texas, alongside Liana LeFou at the linebacker position. Boo Carter at Tennessee is probably going to start for him right away. And a name that I'm interested, he's not even the head coach, it's the offensive coordinator, Brandon Marion. Really fascinating to see the go offense at Colorado. I think there's interesting pieces in there, but holistically looking at the coaching staff, I'm not sold, not really buying a lot of stock in Colorado football right now, because I don't have a ton of faith in Deion Sanders at this time.
No, yeah, and they were definitely a team that I was inferring about when I was talking about what teams you might have ahead of Iowa State, because Colorado to me isn't, they had talent last year. They had a great portal class last year, and it was all kind of squandered away. They had some elite talent. They had Jordan Seaton last year. They had Juju Lewis, albeit as a true freshman at quarterback, who was an elite prospect out of high school last year. They had Kadon Salter from Liberty. You would have liked, like you said, they had Amarian Miller. You would have liked them to perform a lot better with the talent they had, and it just seemed to fall apart. And I think that starts with coaching. Obviously, they've made some pretty okay moves, like you just referred to, but all in all, Colorado's a team you're going to have to wait and see. Obviously, they had a great year with a Heisman and Travis Hunter and an All-American caliber player in Shedeur Sanders. And when they lose those two guys, they fall off a cliff and have a pretty bad season. So, in my opinion, not super high on them. Their ceiling and floor are going to be a lot wider in margin just because of the nature of the beast there with the talent that they have. But, yeah, I'm not super high on them either. I might honestly put them below Iowa State if I was making my personal list.
Yeah, and that was something that I thought about as well. But I did want to give respect to the amount of production that they brought in from the transfer portal. So I at least wanted to give them credit for that. But I understood if you wanted to have them at the very bottom behind an Iowa State. This is more like acknowledging the transfer portal class being filled with productive guys versus potential. Although I've said it on another person's channel. Shout out to Miami Flow, by the way. I think Deion Sanders is personally the most overrated coach in this conference. The fact that we're 4 years in and you have more jerseys retired than bowl appearances, that's a little bit of a red flag for me.
Ouch.
I'm not gonna lie.
Ouch. Yeah, no, you make a solid point there. The Shedeur Sanders jersey retirement, I get it. Not really, but it's just one of those things. Travis Hunter makes perfect sense. Heisman winner. Shedeur, I mean, he was great. I wouldn't retire every great quarterback's number. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's completely understand that for sure. But hey, I'm gonna go ahead and kick it out to number 14 for the Big 12. I got West Virginia here. I do like the porter class that they brought in here. Like Cam Cook is someone that I'm really excited to see in a Rich Rod offense. But also bringing in some other nice players like DJ Epps from Troy and then Ezekiel Dunham Campbell as well. I also think that Rich Rod, I will say this about him too. He just fits so incredibly well. I'm glad to see him back in the Big 12. I think this is an improved team from last year, but why I have them so low? It's not even so that I think West Virginia is going to be a bad football team. I don't. It's more of giving some love to the other teams that I have ahead of West Virginia at this time. I just think some of those other teams are a little bit better and improved a little bit more than maybe West Virginia did.
Yeah, I definitely don't fault you for having them here. I might be a little bit higher on them just because, like you said, I like some of the additions they've made. But I mean, Rich Rod is another coach who is kind of a wait and see type of guy. You would have thought in year one. I know they underwent a big overhaul in their own right, but with some of the talent they had, like Nico Marchiol, he was a quarterback who had a lot of potential going into last season. You don't really do anything with it. I believe they bring in Michael Hawkins Jr. from Oklahoma, another quarterback who has big play ability. He was a very highly recruited prospect out of high school. You would like to see them do something with the talent, just haven't shown it so far. You could chalk that up to roster overhaul, like I said, but it's definitely one of those. He's another wait and see type of guy.
Yeah, and they're also going to need to figure out how to replace Cam Vaughn, who did transfer to Miami. So that's a big loss for this West Virginia football team that they'll also have to figure out as well. I'm just excited to see Cam Cook, man. I think he's going to be a lot of fun to watch in the West Virginia offense. It's again, I mean, I don't think they're a bad team at all. I think I'm higher on the teams ahead of them more so than thinking that West Virginia is just going to be awful.
Yeah, Cam Cook is definitely one of those traditional bell cow type of running backs. If you can lean on him in this offense, if you're able to develop an offense around him more so than what they had last year, I think they stand a good shot in the Big 12. That's probably why I'm a little bit higher on them because I think they definitely upgrade at running back. But it's still, I mean, you need more than that, albeit how much I love Cam Cook. So
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, one of those other teams that I'm like higher on than I guess than I am on West Virginia is going to be UCF for me. Really a similar amount of how they improved themselves in the transfer portal. But I looked at what they lost, and yes, they did lose Malachi Lawrence to the NFL, which is, I mean, that's always going to boost the prestige of your program. But really, other than that, I think the only other loss that you could say is going to kind of hurt them is maybe Tavon Jackson. But I think they improved at the quarterback position. They brought in Alonzo Barnett III out of James Madison alongside Keon Jenkins from FIU. Those are two guys that both started at their previous school. So one of them's got to start, and one of them's bound to be better than whatever they had at the quarterback position last year, which it held them back a little bit. It's a reason why UCF almost lost to, I believe it was Jacksonville State at the beginning of last year. They almost lost that game. But then they also made some nice additions also across the board as well, bringing in like a Cooper Tepstra on the offensive line, in particular on the defense. I think the defense will be vastly improved. Plus, they added a couple of special teamers. So I think special teams is going to be better as well. So I think we could see a little bit of a leap here for Scott Frost to the point where, hey, maybe we see the Knights like participate in bowl season.
yeah, and UCF is a team that you could easily put towards the bottom. I honestly give props to you for putting them above a few of these teams because I do think they're going to be better this year. I wasn't super high on them coming into this season. I think they surpassed mine and most people's expectations. Scott Frost is a coach that, putting bias aside, I am very low on. Outside of the miraculous season they had in, I believe, 2018, 2017. He hasn't had a winning season at any school he's been. So you would like to see them get to a bowl game. You would like to see them win a bowl game. But like you talked about, I think they definitely made an upgrade at quarterback. They were a team that dealt with a lot of injuries last year, which I think if they don't this year, they could be very well off. Obviously, that's an attrition issue maybe that they have there, and they might see something similar this year. It's hard to predict injuries, obviously. But I definitely think they got the right fit at quarterback in Alonzo Barnett. I definitely think he fits the mold of a Scott Frost offense very, very ideally. So for that, I am much higher on them as an offense. As a defense, it's gonna be tough for me to pinpoint really exactly how good they can be in year two under Scott Frost, just because I mean they weren't really anything special last year. But yeah, I definitely think they are probably better. They probably at least have a higher floor than a few other teams on this list.
Yeah, and it helps that defensively they did bring a couple of starters from the G5 ranks last year. Like Bruno Dahl is someone that I think is going to be a sneaky good player at UCF. He was an all conference player last year at Akron, was a bright spot on a team that didn't really have anything to play for because of the APR restrictions that they were dealing with. And then they also brought in a couple of nice linebackers in Jaleel Culbreth and Rashad Henry, who came from Old Dominion and UMass respectfully, were full time starters for them too. So I think the defense is at least allows themselves to be at a point where there is a ceiling that exists with UCF where not only can they make a bowl game, but maybe they can like sneak up on some people and win like 8 to 9 games if everything goes right. I think that ceiling actually does exist for them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I would go that far in year two. I think it's possible. How possible, I guess, is another wait and see. But I would definitely probably have them. I think their preseason win total is either 4.5 or 5.5. I would probably mark them at about the 5 to 7. Personally, I would probably cap them off at 8 if I was making my, you know, my ceiling and floors right now. I could see with how the Big 12 can be more can eat itself a little bit more, how they could sneak up on a couple teams in the conference, maybe work their way up towards the top end of that conference. But to me, it's just Scott Frost. I don't have a ton of trust. If their offense was really good, I could see like very, very good, not just really good. If their offense was borderline elite, like we're
Yeah.
talking top 20, I could definitely see that happening. But I think they will be good, maybe not to that elite offense that maybe an Old Dominion was last year.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, we'll definitely have to wait and see. Like UCF intrigues me a little bit. I'm saying that as a Cincinnati guy, who has UCF is one of our primary rivals back to the like the American Day. So a little bit of full disclosure there. One coach that I think is going to certainly find itself. I would imagine the seat has to be at least a little bit warm with how disappointing the last 2 years have been. For this particular program, though, I do have the Kansas Jayhawks coming in up next. They come in as my number 12 team in the Big 12. I think this is an important year for Lance Leipold. I think he needs to really sit down and try to get a successful season. He's in year number 7. They were off to a good start as a program, but then last couple of years, yes, you could say they dealt with injuries, but honestly, like everyone deals with injuries. So how much of an excuse can you make from that standpoint? Got to replace the starting quarterback in Jalen Daniels. That's going to be really the $1 million question. They brought in Chase Jenkins, who transfers in from Rice. He's coming from a triple option offense. So, as you may know, Kansas does things a little bit different offensively. So, what kind of impact can Chase Jenkins make? Outside of the quarterback position, I am intrigued by some of the offensive weapons that they brought in, such as like a Yazin Lewis and a Jalen Dupree. I worry about the depth behind some of the starters or projected starters that they bring in. And because how I talked about how everyone deals with injuries as the season wears on, I can see Kansas being one of those teams that starts off relatively well and then kind of fizzles out as we get into late October and into the November timeframe.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Kansas isn't a team that I've done a super extensive deep dive on yet. So I'm not sure quite what they're looking at in terms of personnel. I will say for coaching, I believe they kept their coaching staff intact. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure either. I just know that I know that Lance Leopold is still here, and I don't know how much I want to put in on a Lance Leopold right now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would say go ahead and Google that for me before I expose myself on national television right now. No, but last year I will say they did a very good job at creating a defense for that team. They weren't very consistent defensively, but there definitely were games that were decided or won even by that defense. I was very high on that defense going into last year. I think they probably didn't quite meet that expectation, but they're still pretty decent. I would say if that coaching staff is still intact, like I said, you could expect them to be at least an average, maybe top half defensive team in the conference. The $1 million question, like you said, is quarterback though. not super high on them with the additions that they've made from what I've seen. I obviously do need to do a deeper dive on them this offseason. I will get to that at some point. It's just Kansas normally isn't towards the top of my list and teams I need to do a ton of research for off the rip. But yeah, definitely a team that is going to hover around the middle of the pack, with Lance Leipold at least. Uh, their ceiling is very, very low, but I think their floor is maybe a little bit higher. I might honestly put them below a few of the teams you said already. I think I like on paper I like a West Virginia team more than a Kansas team going into this season, but I don't fault you at all for having them ranked or power rated above West Virginia.
Yeah, because I look at Kansas. I think that this is at least a team where I think the floor is a little bit higher for them than some of the teams that I have behind Kansas at this moment. But as you mentioned, probably not a super high ceiling team. I think there may be, they finish like sixth or eighth in the conference. I think that's a really good year for Kansas. Uh, Unlike maybe a couple of other teams like a UCF or West Virginia or even like a Colorado, I don't see them in like a best case scenario, all of a sudden seeing this Kansas team being in the hunt for a Big 12 title, but I don't think that they're going to be horrific either.
Yeah, and Kansas, this is going to be a little bit of a tangent. I'm not going to make it a full rant like I did for a few teams a few weeks ago, but Kansas is a team that, I mean, traditionally a basketball school. In the past couple years, they haven't been bad at basketball, but this year they exit sooner than they would have liked. They finished the regular season a little bit worse than they would have liked. So you would think, like a lot of these teams, like a Kentucky, like a North Carolina, these traditional basketball schools in Indiana, I mean, Jesus, they would go a little bit harder in football because they definitely have shown sparks of being a feasible a team in the Big 12, like a dangerous team that can compete at the top of the conference if they had the resources. But they still really don't. They're still far behind a lot of their conference opponents in terms of that. You would like to see that with the basketball school, maybe not quite living up to their blue blood, representation in that. But yeah, I digress.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and keep it rolling here. Moving on to number 11, kind of talking about another coach here that I would imagine not only is the seat warm, I would imagine the seat is actually kind of hot for this particular coach up next. I got the Baylor Bears coming in at number 11. Dave Aranda needs to get this thing turned around. He's been trying to recapture the magic of the 2021 season where they won the Big 12 title under his tutelage early on in his tenure. And then they just haven't been the same the last 3 to 4 years, to the point where even though they have a quarterback that's going to the NFL, maybe as a day 3 pick, they missed the bowl game. And it wasn't because of the offense, because they had some offensive weapons and they were a fun team to watch offensively. It was the defense that was a little bit more of a problem, which is crazy to me because Dave Aranda, he's a defensive minded coach.
Right.
So you would imagine that it would be a flip situation. And I look at what they did in the transfer portal, huge addition in DJ Wagway. I think he's oozing with talent and just needs the right system to really thrive in. And I hope he gets that opportunity. But other than that, the biggest problem was their defense. And, they add a Hosea Wheeler, who I think is going to be a really good interior defensive lineman. He transfers from Indiana. They also brought in another interior D lineman in Jamal Weiss. But other than that, if you want to talk about production brought in, it didn't really do much on the side of the ball that had the most trouble in. So I'm worried about Baylor just kind of being the same thing as what they were last year, where the team is fun to watch. It's exciting ball games to watch on Fox, but in terms of actual what to expect from a rec perspective, I don't know if we should expect too terribly much.
Yeah, and I would have to agree on the hot seat thing. If this year isn't a bowl eligible at least season for Dave Aranda, I don't see any point in really keeping him around. I think that is the expectation, or at least should be the expectation at Baylor. And the biggest problem that they've had is to play in the trenches. Obviously, Sawyer Robertson was a very, very good quarterback. They had a few good pieces. I forget the name of the running. I think Bryson Washington last year, if I remember correctly. It was a pretty solid running back for them. They had offensive weapons. They just couldn't really put it together defensively to transcend.
Yep.
I really like DJ Lagway, like you said. I think if they are mirroring kind of a Georgia Tech or a Vanderbilt from last year, he could be a very, very good fit. I think DJ Lagway is a quarterback who needs structure. He's not an all-world quarterback. He's not a Trevor Lawrence, that who's just going to come in and be a national championship caliber winning quarterback immediately. I definitely think he desperately needs structure, which I think they can provide for him. My biggest thing for them is, like you said, getting better in the trenches. And I believe they hired a new defensive coordinator. I think they got rid of Matt Pollage. That will be big for them. If they can take a step forward in that regard, they should be able very easily, in my opinion, to get to that bowl eligible range. If not, I think this is the last year of Dave Aranda very, very easily. So, especially if they start the season at like 2-3, I could see him being the first coach fired like midway through the season.
Yeah, and Baylor is one of those programs where like they're in like a oil rich part of the state. So I would imagine, like they should be a better program than what they are. And it's a solid football stadium out there too. They have the facilities to compete. It's just for, I don't know if it's a coaching issue or if there's something else going on. They just haven't been able to put it together as we dive ourselves a little bit deeper into the NIL era. So I I I hope that it works out for them. I think this team's going to be fun to watch, but I just don't know if they're going to be that great this year, to be honest with you.
I mean, yeah, it's fair to assume that. I definitely think they're capable. They with the talent they have, with the coaching in on paper that they have, I think they are very capable of taking that step back up towards the top of the conference. But from what they've shown, like I think I said to you in text message a few days ago, when a coach shows you who they are, you can kind
Mm-hmm.
of just expect that from them. It's it's easy to think optimistically about a coach like Dave Aranda, who has been to the top, but when they show you that capable of the next level, capable of pushing a team that maybe from a talent perspective toward.
Yeah, so hey, you might be like starting to break up on me. So yeah, if you lose signal,
Hello?
yeah. We lost Colton. He must have lost it like signal on his end. He might come back. We'll just have to wait and see, or he'll be the ghost of like Christmas past or something. But hey, anyhow, we'll go ahead and keep things rolling here in terms of our Big 12 rankings. So number 10 is interesting. I have a hard time of pinpointing this team. I think this team is going to be a lot better than last year for obvious reasons. I do have Oklahoma State coming in as my number 10 team. I am someone that really liked Eric Morris at North Texas, and that offense is going to be electric to watch in Drew Messamaker, Caleb Hawkins in the backfield alongside their free like top wide receivers that they brought in. Wyatt Young, who is their top guy at North Texas, alongside Justin Bullock from Illinois and Chris Barnes of Wake Forest. I think those wide receivers, they're going to be appointment television on the offensive side of the ball. The thing that really concerns me more than anything, and why I couldn't be that much higher on them as our Lord and Savior and Colton, I think might be coming back here.
Hello.
Hello, I think like you lost like a connection for a split second.
Yes, I do believe I did, and I might do it again. So I'll be on spot work here as much as I can. I am deep in the Appalachian wilderness as we speak.
Hey, it's all good, man. But yeah, I have Oklahoma State at number 10. It's not just because of the offense. I worry about their defense a little bit here. And the reason why I worry about their defense is, so we joke a lot about how this is the Oklahoma State Mean Green, or this is the like the North Texas Cowboys, right? With all the players that they brought over from North Texas. But you sit down and watch North Texas' biggest games last year, the Tulane and the USF game, and even the San Diego State at the end of the year. That defense gave up a lot of points, and they were exposed a little bit in those big games. So the concern that I have is, now that you're here in the Big 12 and you're bringing some of those players from that defense along with you. Yes, they could get better, but a lot of these teams that you're going to face in the Big 12 are either at the same caliber of a San Diego State or a Tulane or a USF, and in some cases it might be better. So I I know there's been some hype around Oklahoma State, but that gives me pause. They did also lose a little bit in the trenches, and I didn't see them really bring in anybody in the transfer portal or in the high school ranks. So I worry a little bit about the offensive trenches as well going into this year. But I do think that they absolutely have the playmakers to keep up with anybody if the other elements of their team are at least competent.
Yeah, and for this Oklahoma State team, I think they mirror very much so Auburn in the SEC. I
Mm.
think they might be a little bit overrated just because of the new coaching overhaul, how fun that offense will be, the fun quarterbacks they just got, and Auburn got Byron Brown. Obviously, Oklahoma State gets Maker. I think they definitely could have a fun offense like you talked about. Is that enough to torpedo them towards the top of the conference? I don't think so. I definitely think they are being a little bit overrated. I think they definitely could make a bowl game. I think that should at least be the expectation in year one is to make a bowl game. Um,
Yeah,
at the
and there he is. He's gone once again early, so like in the process of being gone. But I mean, I look at this. I mean, Oklahoma State team. They can't be worse than last year, right? This is still a team that it's going to be an improved unit from last year. It's just a matter of what are we going to be able to get on the defensive side of the ball. I think it's going to be that $1 million question, though. So a fascinating team to watch. And I think they're going to be how they play
LO.
in the Oregon game is going to tell us a lot about who they are for sure. But with that being said, we'll go ahead and move it along now to at least round out this bottom half of the Big
Before you
12.
do that, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you
Okay.
okay now. Those Appalachian
Okay.
Mountains are they're doing a number on you.
Yeah, I had to fight off a bear, man. It's getting crazy out here.
Yeah, the fight off of air, man. That's the kind of things that you get here on the live show between the like the Big Ten rants and Colden's expeditions in the Appalachian Mountains. That's really the type of content that we have over here.
Oh yeah.
But but yeah, man, number 9 to wrap up the bottom half of my personal rankings. I do have Cincinnati here. Um I think Cincinnati actually the talent overall on the roster outside of the quarterback position could be a little bit better. I really like the Cade Wofford addition, bringing him in from Kent State. I do like some of the other ads that they add along this team. It's just a matter of and they do also bring Joe Cotton, who's a really good offensive lineman, alongside Evan Tensdale, both second team All Big 12 players that are coming back. So I think the trench play is going to be pretty good. Max Fletcher, I believe, is back as well. So special team should be just fine. I really worry about how much of a drop off are we going to see at quarterback because Brandon Sorsby isn't here anymore. And that's going to be a tremendous loss. One of the highest rated quarterbacks in the transfer portal this year. He's not in this program anymore. They also got to figure out how to replace Evan Pryor, who is a solid running back for this team. And on top of that, can Scott Satterville right the ship because this team started off pretty hot, but then they ended up losing their last 4 games of the year. So some questions that got to be answered. I feel a little bit better about this team in comparison to last year, but they still have certainly some questions that they need to answer. But at least the trench play, if nothing else, should at least keep them solid.
Yeah, and Cincinnati's probably a team that I would power rate a little bit lower on my personal list just because I think they should have been a lot better than they were last year. Like you said, they ended on a cold spell with Brendan Sorsby at quarterback, with Tawee Walker and Evan Pryor at running back, with Dante Corleone on the defensive line. They definitely had Golday as well. They definitely had some solid pieces. I towards the beginning of the season, I thought they could be potentially competing for a Big 12 title, and they just didn't get there. Doesn't give me a ton of hope for Scott Satterfield. I know prior to last season, I think Cincinnati fans might have agreed with me about Scott Satterfield. I saw maybe some, negative coverage of Scott before last season. It might have just been a loud minority. I'm not super familiar with the Cincinnati football crowd, but I'm just not super high on them overall. I definitely think they are a team that has proven they can still be towards the top of the conference. They can still compete, but in terms of competing in the top half of the conference, especially without a lot of those key pieces that they lost from last year, I think it's less likely than it is likely. Um, I think I would probably have them hovering around the 5 to 7 win range. I think they won 7 games last year. I'm not entirely sure, but uh, yeah, definitely a team that I'm probably going to be a little bit lower on than you, Jake.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand where you're coming from because I'm not super high on Scott Satterfield, but I do want to acknowledge I think the roster outside of the quarterback position is at least a little bit better. They're gonna have a chance to win games like in the trenches. I think the offensive trenches, they're gonna be they'll be in a position to where they'll at least be competitive in a lot of their games. I don't see them getting blown out very often, and that Nipper Stadium is a tougher environment too. So I do think Cincinnati. I think they're going to be okay, but I mean they're not going to necessarily set the world on fire either, like you mentioned. Yeah, let my man like be completely like speechless there or fighting off another bear as we get ready to jump into the top half of our Big 12 personal spring rankings going into this year. And for number 8, I actually did have Arizona State, which I know like Colton was someone that was particularly high on. Which if we're able to get a signal back for him, he's going to be able to let me know about his thoughts on Arizona State at number 8. They're going to have to figure out, they lost some key pieces on the offensive side of the ball, and it's not just Sam Levitt. They also lost Raik Brown. They also lost Kanye Udo, who actually transfers to Liberty. That was a really solid number 2 back for this Arizona State squad. Jordan Tyson is another big piece as well. Keith Abney and Max are an anchor, the offensive tackle. Those are both potentially first-round players as well. I do love that. I think for Cutler Boley, who's going to be penciled in as the starter, and he's shown flashes at Kentucky last year, that is they do have at least some good offensive weapons in Omarion Miller and Reed Harris. Very high on Owen Wong as well. He's one of my top individual defenders in the country. It's just I think Sam Levitt is a bigger loss than anticipated, as well as some of the other like NFL talent that I don't think they're going to fully be able to replace through this transfer portal cycle. Although it is a solid class.
Yeah, you got me back now, Jake.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Arizona State is a team that I think is actually a little bit underrated this year. It's 8th spot. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you. You're okay.
All right, this is 8th spot for Arizona State.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I could see that. I definitely think that is they're probably going to be in that range. I would probably have them a little bit higher. I might even have them top 5, just because I do trust Kenny Dillingham. Cutter Boley as well, like you talked about, is in my opinion a great addition at quarterback. I know his stats don't fly off the page, but he's definitely the type of quarterback that I think Kenny Dillingham is going to be able to work with. And on top of that, they won was it 8 games last year with Jeff Sims at the helm for a majority of the season. The turnover machine himself, Jeff Sims. They were able to knock off. They were able to knock off a playoff team in Texas Tech when Sam Levitt was healthy there. I definitely think they are a team that's going to be able to hover, even if they do lose talent, like what you said. They do obviously lose a ton of talent, but what they bring in, I think they're going to be able to make it work rather. I really trust this staff to keep them afloat. I don't think they're a team that's going to drastically fall off. I think I did predict them to have a little bit worse season just because they lost Cam Scadaboo last year. And it was more so that they were injured than the loss of Cam Scadaboo. I did obviously losing him did hurt that offense a good bit, but overall I still have a ton of trust in this staff. I still think they can get them probably towards the top third of the conference, if not the top half, like where you have them.
I do think that they do have one of the higher floors where like Arizona State, I'm going to pencil in as maybe even in a like a little bit more of a worst case scenario. I still think Arizona State would at least make a bowl game. Like at worst, they're a 500 team, and that's shit hitting the fan like for Arizona State. So I do think that's there. I just think I need to see Color Bowley kind of put it together more often alongside some of the other pieces that they brought in order to really sell it and really be higher on Arizona State, because they also got to replace like a Keyshawn Elliott, who's a NFL leaving the NFL, and that was a key linebacker for him last year as well. So it's not so much the offense. I think the offense has some really good pieces in place. It's just what are they? Who's going to step up outside of maybe like an Owen Long, for example? Because it can't just be him on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, no, that's definitely fair. Defense is a big question mark for them. My thought process through that is the Big 12 doesn't have a ton of elite defenses. I think last year the two best were Texas Tech and BYU, and those were the two best teams in the conference. I definitely don't expect Arizona State to be back there like they were 2 years ago. But I still think with the coaching staff in place, with the upside at offense they'll have, and with some of the defensive moves they made, they can definitely still be towards the top of that conference.
Yeah, well, yeah, for sure. I mean, that certainly is in there for for Arizona State. Is we'll see if they have what it takes to like to find that ceiling, or is it similar to what we saw from them last year, where they were good, but they weren't a great football team necessarily. I think that'll be something to keep an eye out for as the year progresses. I will say that I'm a little bit higher on this team. And we kind of talked about this when we were talking about the Big 12 holistically. How about one of the coaches that actually not only made it to the college football playoff, but actually made it to a national championship game? How about TCU, who, their coach has been talked about a little differently because of how some things that he said in the media, considering Josh Hoover did leave for Indiana. But I'm intrigued by the quarterback that they brought in Jaden Craig, who does have starting experience from Harvard, so we know that he's a pretty smart kid in his own right. The secondary could be sneaky good for TCU. They added 3 players of starting caliber in that defensive secondary, so they might have themselves some ball hawks out there in that defensive secondary. And Sonny Dykes, I'm always going to give him a little bit more of that benefit of the doubt because he does have that playoff appearance. He was able to take a team to a national championship appearance. I think this is a good team. Just have some questions about that quarterback position. They also have to replace Eric McAllister. So who's going to step up as well as that wide receiver room is another big question for me for this TCU football squad. But overall, it's a good team. I think they could make things like interesting and maybe pull off some upsets against maybe some teams that I'll have in my top 5.
No, yeah, for sure. I think you hit the nail on the head with Sonny Dykes. I think he's a coach, and he has a staff that has at least earned our trust. Maybe not as a coach who's capable of winning the Big 12, although they have been very good in recent years. I believe really last year was their best year. I think maybe 5-7 year before. I can't exactly remember, but he's definitely a coach who's been able to make stuff work at TCU. And you saw, I think the best example of that is in the bowl game. Obviously, bowl games aren't always the best measurement for how good teams really are. But to go head to head with a team as talented as USC, although obviously they didn't have their best players on the field the whole game, neither team did, and they were still out, or they were still able to go out there and win that game against a team that's probably very, very vastly more talented than they are. I think that falls on coaching. And they're a team who, like you referenced, they did make a national championship. I would go to say it was probably more of a flash in the pan fluky type of thing. I don't know if they're getting back there. Obviously, in the CFP portal NIL era, anything's possible. We saw Indiana win the national championship, so I'm not going to say it's impossible, but obviously I'm not super, super high on them. But I do think, like we've talked about for a few other teams, they have a pretty high floor. I think they are definitely a bowl caliber team year in, year out. It will be interesting to see what they make of the quarterback situation since they did have Hoover for the last 3 years. Obviously, he and Dykes wasn't wrong about Josh Hoover. He did throw a bunch of interceptions, but I mean, does that fall on coaching? I would go to say so. So I think they got a lot more to worry about than Josh Hoover leaving for Indiana.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm certainly intrigued by as well. Is if we see Jaden Craig like go out, because we're going to presume that he's going to be the starter. That's what he would transferred in here for, and he ends up throwing multiple interceptions in a couple of their first 3 to 4 games of the season. That's those criticisms of Sonny Dykes is going to be a little bit louder, and so it's a little bit of a more of a much need unnecessary distraction, I guess I would say for Sonny Dykes. But I think there's a good team in place that could challenge most of the top of the Big 12 on any given day. It's just what is TCU from a consistency standpoint is why I have them at number 7. And I just think the other teams ahead of them are going to be more consistent from a week to week basis versus what we could see from TCU.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. Um, yeah, I mean TCU isn't. I don't think at this point they're a team like I said who's going to compete at the top of the conference like a Texas Tech is. I don't think they have the talent required to do that. I definitely do think they have the coaching to be in the mix.
Yeah. Yeah, so at least like be there in Arlington at the end of the year. That scenario does that exists like more in the best place. And I'll say this about this next team that we're going to reveal that happens to be relatively close to Arlington. I do have Houston coming in next at number 6. And how about Willie Fritz, man, being able to get this team well ahead of schedule? Had them as a somewhat competitive team in year number 1 in spite of some questions at the quarterback position. He found this guy, and listen, Houston ends up coming out, and they were like a darn near 10-win team, I believe, last year, winning the bowl game, and they finished ranked, at least in my personal top 25 to end the year. So, Houston well ahead of schedule, and they bring in a couple of all-conference players back as well as Amir Thomas and Will James. Connor Wegman, I believe, is also back as well, but definitely keep an eye on Keyshawn Henderson. He's probably not going to play a ton this year, but he's going to be the future of that program once Connor Wegman ends up departing. So I'm very excited for Houston beyond this year if they can keep Keyshawn Henderson in the program for more than just a couple of years. I think he'll be able to play sooner rather than later. Just don't think I should see a lot of him this year. So I like Willie Fritz as a coach. He's been a winner everywhere that he's gone, whether it's Georgia Southern or leading Tulane's at the Cotton Bowl. And they also generally, they added more than what they lost. I mean, outside of Tanner Colzier and Latrell McCutcheon, there's some good pieces here in place as well that I think we could see Houston not only as a bowl team, but, a team that we see in the top 25 for most of the year.
Yeah, I definitely think Willie Fritz and of course his staff there, but Willie Fritz especially is a coach we were all sleeping on a little bit. I mean, obviously they didn't have the first or the greatest first year under him in 2024, but they definitely made it work last year. Connor Wigman, obviously a very good Haynes King-esque quarterback. I definitely could see them towards the top of this conference again. I do think that the general public is leaning a little too heavily on the over here for the for Houston. But another team who's very capable just with the coaching job they've done there, not traditionally a super great school. I know they had some solid years with Dana Holgerson. They're not a bad school by any means, but just recently made their jump to the Power Four. So they're not Michigans, they're not Ohio States. So we don't have high expectations for them perennially, but I think Willie Fritz has done a good enough job there. So where we can, it is fair to expect more from them this year than in the past few years, just because of that job that he's done. But definitely would probably still lean towards the 7-8 win range. I'm not super confident, even though they did have a good year last year, that they can replicate that and then some. I definitely think there are teams above them that you'll probably have who are more capable of pulling off a better record in conference play than the Cougars will this year.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's still going to be a pretty good team, and that they can certainly make some noise. Really outside of maybe like the Texas Tech game. I mean, I expect them to at least be competitive in all of their matchups, regardless of who they're going up against. Texas Tech, might be built just a tad differently, but it's definitely a good
Just a
team.
little bit.
I've There's certainly a scenario where they can get to that 10-win range, if everything goes right for them, and get another double-digit win season and just continue to build things up at Houston. Plus, if you don't have to play Keyshawn Henderson much and he gets time to like develop behind Connor Wegman, you unleash him in 2027, man, like next year's team could be the one that competes for the Big 12 title.
Oh yeah, and there's definitely reason that people are comparing him to, or at least saying he could be the next Signetti. I wouldn't probably go to say that, but he's definitely a coach who's been slept on. He's an older guy, not been given a ton of opportunities. Obviously, did very well at Tulane, has done very well at Houston, and like I said, for TCU, it's the portal era, it's the NIL era. Anything's possible. I wouldn't say he's the next Signetti, but he's definitely more than capable of getting them there. Like you said, next year. I just am not super high on this team from a ceiling perspective. Uh, if they did end up in that Big 12 title game, I wouldn't be the most shocked. I wouldn't be as shocked as if a UCF or Colorado made it.
Yeah.
Definitely not. Definitely not for those two teams. But even like an Oklahoma State, I feel like that would probably be way more shocking, even though there is a ton of hype around them. Just because of where Willie Fritz has gotten them. I definitely think he is a coach who has been vastly underrated throughout his coaching career so far. So he's definitely more than capable of getting them there.
Yeah, and I know via like the CFF Plainsmen, since you talked about Oklahoma State for a second, they, telling us that, hey, like this is like the most improved offense, like most of like the North Texas offense went to OSU. I would rank them at least 8. Yeah, it's not just that like, I don't think they're a bad team or anything, and I'm sure you would agree with this too. It's just I think there's some I think there's some more complete teams out there, which is why, like you mentioned, like if Houston made it to the Big 12 title, it'd be a little bit of a surprise, but it wouldn't be a complete shocker, like if it was somebody in like my bottom half that made it to the Big 12 title game instead.
No, yeah, definitely. I would for the Oklahoma State. Who did you say said that?
It was the CFF Plainsmen.
Yeah, no disrespect meant by our coverage on Oklahoma State. I think, like I said, their offense could be very, very good to potentially one of the better offenses in the conference. It's just a matter of like I think you alluded to a second ago, that there are more complete teams in this conference, definitely towards the top of the conference, but even towards the middle. It's just not knowing whether or not that defense. I know if you're a fan of Oklahoma State, it's going to be hard to hear, and you're going to think we're slandering. So there's nothing meant by that, at least on my end. I don't know. Jake might secretly have a vendetta against Oklahoma State, which he definitely told me before the stream, which is why I had to come on here and defend them. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I like you said, Jake, there are definitely more complete teams, at least on paper, this early in the spring.
Yeah, and one of those complete teams that I think we're gonna see is like the Kansas State Wildcats, who actually do come in my top 5. Man, I am so excited to see Colin Klein become the new head coach of Kansas State. I mean, seeing him grow from being the like the Heisman Trophy candidate that he was at the quarterback position during my high school days, and then he gets the opportunity to go coach. He was most recently the offensive coordinator over at Texas A&M. Helping out with a little bit with the development of Marcel Reed. And now he goes to Kansas State, uber talented quarterback in Avery Johnson, but just hasn't been able to put everything together yet. I'm really high on Colin Klein as a coach. And this would be my sneaky pick in terms of not only going to the Big 12 championship game, this is also my sleeper pick to possibly go to the college football playoff. I think that highly of them. I really like the Lendell Gregory addition that they had in the portal as well. Got them from Oklahoma State. They also added a Rodney Fields Jr. to relieve some pressure off of Avery Johnson moving forward. Was one of the bright spots on that Oklahoma State team. Then they also had a few other really nice defensive pieces from the transfer portal to help round this roster out. Oh, and they bring in multiple all conference players too. So I am incredibly high on Kansas State. I'm probably higher than consensus, but I think this team is going to be really good in the spring, and they're going to be rebounding from what was really a disappointing year last year for this Kansas State squad.
Yeah, and I don't blame you at all for picking this battle. Um, Kansas State definitely is a team that I think is good enough. For me, you're a little bit higher on them than I am. I'm not low on Kansas State by any means, but it Kansas State once again mirrors, like I said, how Oklahoma State mirrors Auburn. They also mirror an Oklahoma State or an Auburn. But the difference between Oklahoma State and Kansas State, which is ultimately why I would still end up having Kansas State higher than the Cowboys, is they just they're coming off of a better season, and they're
Yeah,
going to add a lot more talent all around on top of getting a borderline elite offensive mind. Borderline is almost disrespectful to say a very, very great offensive mind in Colin Klein. Um, the biggest question, obviously, and I know they have the personnel on the defensive side of the ball. The biggest question mark, though, is going to be the defense. If they can remain towards the top of the conference, I know they weren't elite defensively last year, but if they can still be at that top half of the conference and pair that with what should have been last year an elite offense going into next year, if they can turn it into that, I think they definitely could be where you're saying. Not super sold yet that they're going to be able to do that, although I am still higher on them than I still think they could win 8 or 9 games next year.
yeah, and I think for Kansas State specifically, I think there's even a world out there where I look at their schedule and I don't see any game where I don't think that they could be competitive in. So I like there's a chance they could run the table on this regular season schedule. It's relatively navigable for Kansas State. It's just a matter of okay, I feel pretty comfortable with the offenses, like you said, defensively. If this is even just a good defense, not even a borderline elite defense by Big 12 standards, I think Kansas State can be a real problem, even for who I'm going to ultimately have as number one in my Big 12 rankings.
Yeah, and I definitely see where you're coming from on that. I would ask, Avery Johnson is still the quarterback there, correct?
Yeah, yes, sir. He is. Is still quarterbacking with luscious locks.
Yeah, pretty high on him going into last. I can't really put a ton of faith in him. How much of his shortcomings as a quarterback are on him versus his staff? I guess that's yet to be seen. I know he there were relatively high hopes for him going into last season. It's just to me, so far from what we've seen, it feels like with him as your quarterback, there's going to be a ceiling, and it's not super high offensively.
Yeah, I mean, if Avery Johnson like doesn't develop like you mentioned, and this Kansas State like analysis in the spring is going to make me what look silly like looking back on it, but I I do think that Colin Klein can unlock something that hasn't been unlocked yet. I have that much faith in him. I think he's going to be able to get some development out of Avery Johnson because he does have the physical tools to be really good. But one quarterback that I know is not going to need as much help as an Avery Johnson in terms of that developmental aspect of things. I mean, Noah Fafita is just an absolute superstar,
Ooh.
and Arizona comes in at number 4 for me. Love Noah Fafita. I think he's going to be an absolute stud. He gets paired out with a Cole Rusk, who was a really good tight end at Illinois. They didn't really lose any key pieces in the transfer portal. They do lose a couple of players in the secondary, but I thought they did a solid job of backfilling that with productive members from different schools, alongside adding a couple of pieces in the trenches, plus an Antoine Roberts, who I think is going to be like a solid running back to pair with a Noah Fafita as well. So a good team. Just the difference between Arizona and my top 3 is that there's levels to this, and I think the top 3 teams just have a little bit of a higher baseline than Arizona. but Arizona can beat anyone on any given night.
No, for sure. And Arizona is a team that I was not super high on last year. I was not super high on Brent Brennan going into last season as their head coach. And, on the East Coast, more often than not, Arizona fell in one of those midnight games. So I remember cold nights in the East Coast where Brent Brennan was out there proving me wrong every single week and just putting together some unlikely wins. Um, and they ended up having a very good season. You talked about Noah Fafita. They don't call him the Polynesian Kyler Murray for no reason. I mean, he might be 5'5" or whatever, but dude can play ball. He's definitely a very good quarterback. And it's a good pick. From my initial kind of analysis of Arizona that I've done this offseason, their roster was a lot more sneakily better than I might have expected when I started my initial processes. um, Obviously, the coaching is a lot better than I could have predicted, or at least that I did predict going into last year. So they're a school that sneakily could be towards this top of the conference where you have them. I might be a little bit lower on them by the summer than you are, but I definitely like the pick. I wasn't even honestly, it didn't even cross my mind just for just when you were talking about this list. And then that goes to that's more on me. I'm not trying to diss Arizona here. That's more on myself. They definitely, I definitely do not fault you at all for having them this high.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like about this Arizona team, and it's not even like I think they're going to be really good within the conference. I would probably have them as a borderline top 25 team to begin the season. If you asked me to put a top 25 ranking today, like Arizona would certainly be one of those teams that I would consider very heavily. So definitely a very good team, but maybe not a borderline elite team. Like maybe even like the next team that I have coming up, the Utah Utes at number 3, who also have a really good quarterback, and Devin Dampier, really good quarterback player for the Utah Utes, who transfers in for New Mexico last year, was certainly a hit for them in the transfer portal, and they do also return his backfield mate, Wayshawn Parker, the tailback, who is also a third team all conference player. Now, they did get hit a little bit in the transfer portal, which is why I have them at 3 and not possibly in my top 2. And that's with Kyle Whittingham going to Michigan to coach up the Wolverines so that they have an actual adult in the room. But some interesting weapons for Devin Dampier to work with this year in Braden Pagan and Kyrie Scholes, as well as doing a decent job of kind of backfilling talent that they maybe weren't fully expecting to lose. But I do think there's some pieces in place where even though Morgan Scully is a new head coach, he's been a part of his staff since 2007, so we understand what needs to happen here in order to make Utah successful year in and year out. Even with the new head coaching staff, I think they're going to be perfectly fine, and I think they're going to have a lot to say about who goes to Arlington and who doesn't.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think this is probably going to be one of our biggest like where we differ the most. Definitely, probably in the summer, when we're predicting our records, because while I agree with what you said about the roster. I love Devin Dampier. I'm a Devin Dampier truther. I think the offense could be really good once again. And I'm not sure why my brain just is connected to the SEC. It might be SEC bias, but they're a team that, if we're talking about mirroring SEC teams, they mirror Ole Miss a ton. An SEC team that I'm not super high on, and it's because of what they had to go through this offseason. Morgan Scally, it, it's hard to sell me on a defensive minded head coach when I feel like more often than not, when you do bring in a guy who's been there to kind of keep the roster intact as much as possible, who doesn't have, elite head coaching experience, but is, familiarized with the program enough to where it's like, okay, we're not overhauling this thing. You guys don't need to leave. You guys need to stay here. It doesn't make me super hot, like super excited for any of these teams that do that, especially with a defensive minded head coach. I just think when you do that with the defensive coordinator, more often than not, it doesn't work out. So I know that's a little bit more superstitious than based in actual statistics. So I will say it's not as statistically founded as your opinion, Jake, but just from like my initial what I've done into Utah so far, while I do like their offense a ton, I can't say how much I like Devin Dampier. I'm just not super high on them overall going into next year. Honestly, I'd probably cap them at this moment at 9 wins, maybe in that 7, 8 win range by the end of the season.
Yeah, and I know that like having a defensive coach could be a little bit of a concern, but the good news is that at least it's a experienced quarterback that you're talking about. You're not asking a like a true freshman or someone that maybe has been a part of the program but hasn't start to move into a starting role. Now, the longer that Morgan Scully is around, I will say that it's going to be important for him to have good offensive coordinator hires. I think that aspect is important because usually you do, and you're right. The offensive coaches sometimes do a better job of translating because there's more good defensive minds than there is good to elite offensive minds, if that makes sense. So I
I
think it's going to
agree.
be important for him to get those offensive hires and hit on those. But at least for 2026 specifically, I'm not as worried about it because we are talking about at least an experienced quarterback. So that's where I'm coming from with Utah. I still think they're going to be a really good team, even though it is a new coaching staff. And, unlike an Ole Miss, they didn't have as much transfer portal movement either. They did lose key pieces, but it's not as bad as maybe what we saw from an Ole Miss.
No, yeah, yeah. I could definitely see that. That's why I don't have them falling off a cliff like we saw a couple years ago. That was just they offensively they just imploded.
Yeah,
But
that offense like 2 years ago, they didn't have a pulse.
yeah, no, and that's why I still have them hovering in the bowl eligibility range, just not necessarily being a team that I think factors into the playoff equation, or probably, in my opinion, not even the Big 12 championship equation.
Yeah. Which, speaking of that Big 12 championship equation, one of those teams that I do expect, frankly, to be a part of that, return trip to Arlington. I actually do have BYU here at number 2 coming up, and this is just a program where I just have less questions. I really am appreciative of the fact that how they handled things last year, with the fact that they did end up, losing Jake Redsloff at the 11th hour because of some sexual assault allegations that were proven to be untrue, but because he did break the honor code, that's why he got kicked out of school and had to transfer to Tulane in the middle of August. Bear Bachmeyer, who was not expected to start going into the year, he takes over that starting role, and he does a really good job at BYU as starting quarterback. So that right there handles a lot of the big questions that they're going to have. And they have all conference talent all over the field. LJ Martin, the backfield mate, he's going to be a huge pivotal role in this BYU offense once again. They also have Bruce Mitchell, who's a really good offensive lineman, and then some key defensive pieces in Isaiah Glasker and Fatale Satalu as well. Plus, they added Walker Lyons and NKVU Alvey as well. Plus, if Bear Bachmeyer does get hurt, Ryder Lyons is waiting in the wings, and he was a high 4-star recruit coming out of high school this year. So an uber talented kid, where ideally, BYU is blowing teams out, and Ryder Lyons can come in as part of his 4 games. I believe that's still a thing, and get some experience that way. So, really good roster, a team that doesn't have as nearly as many questions as I did last year. So very high on BYU. I got them at number 2.
No, I have no issue with that at all. I will probably end up having in the same place. And I've been talking about teams that mirror other teams. I want you to guess what team I'm about to say. It's not an SEC team that I think BYU mirrors.
Oh, so it's actually not an SEC. You're throwing a curveball on me.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. I could see like a little bit of like shades of Miami, except with the ability to actually close games in like in the month of November consistently.
I could see that, but I was actually more so thinking, believe it or not, the team that beat Miami in the national championship, I think they resemble a lot of what Indiana has been doing, where they have been creating that system, making a more system-driven offense and defense rather than just playing with a bunch of stars.
Mhm.
Bear Backmeyer is one of the better quarterbacks to. He's a system quarterback, just like I thought Fernando Mendoza was a system quarterback at Indiana. That doesn't make him bad. I know that role has a bit of a negative connotation. You talk about system quarterbacks not being like MVPs in the NFL. I don't think you need to be. I think in college, it serves you almost as best if you are a system quarterback. I think Bear Backmeyer executes that system to a borderline elite level, just like how Fernando Mendoza did at Indiana last year. Now, I don't think BYU matches the lines, or at least didn't last year. Obviously, didn't match the lines of a Texas Tech, and you saw it. It was very evident in that game. Definitely not Indiana, but I think with how these teams are set up, they are definitely more reliant on how efficient they can be running the ball and in the RPO game, and then how efficient they are at stopping the run and forcing teams to pass. That mirrors in Indiana. I think that is why this BYU team, is going to be perennially towards the top of this conference.
Yeah, I mean it's certainly like going to be a team that, and let's be honest, I think BYU in most cases in this 12-team playoff era would be making it to the college football playoff. There was some winflation that was happening last year, which led to them being left out at 11-1, and whether that's fair or not, I mean that's what ended up happening. But in most cases, we would have seen BYU at least get included. Maybe not a team that would host, but at least at the bare minimum, be like an Indiana and get a chance to, prove themselves on the road against another highly touted opponent as well. So I do feel like the pain a little bit for BYU because like 11-1 in most cases should be more than good enough to make it into the 12-team playoff.
No, I 100% agree. I think it might be a little bit unfair how the Big 12 schedules aren't, or the ACC schedules even aren't usually looked at as tough as Big 10 and SEC. I think as true as that may be, as deep as the SEC and Big 10 might be more so than the Big 12 or the ACC, I think it definitely uh, it definitely gives the committee more reason not to put in solid teams like BYU that could, serve maybe a better purpose than a James Madison. I hate that I have to diss James Madison here, but I think if given an opportunity, they could definitely make something happen. I know they didn't really show it in the title game last year, but like I said, they're a team who's built not to rely on a single player. I think their best player, or their best players, both on offense and defense, all work together in a cohesive unit, amongst the best in the country. So,
Yeah, and yeah, well, and I understand the argument on strength of schedule if it's a 10-2 like SEC and Big 10 versus 11-1 Big 12. I understand that conversation. I'm hoping though that as we see the SEC at a ninth game, where we start to see 9-3 SEC teams get in over a potential 11-1 Big 12. Because while you can argue strength of schedule, I still think at the end of the day, and this is the same reason that James Madison was rewarded with a playoff spot last year. Winning games is hard at the end of the day, and
absolutely.
teams should be awarded for actually winning games on their schedule. They can't control the strength of schedule aspect. That's usually set up years in advance, but they can control how they play on the field. So, well, if BYU can handle their business, they get to 11-1 again. I think this time we should see them in the playoff unless we see some winflation like we did last year.
No, yeah, and I definitely hope that's the case because those fighting Mormons, man, they definitely can make some noise.
Yeah, and it is an incredible environment too. I think having them host a playoff game would be absolute cinema, and I think the country would be amazed by how incredible that environment is. And you could say that about like a Utah as well too. The BYU fans might disagree a little bit with Utah, but I mean Utah is a really good environment as well. But first, they have to challenge, and I don't think this is going to be really any of surprise right now. I have Texas Tech at number one. They did lose 6 NFL caliber players on the defensive side of the ball, and they lose a total of 9 NFL players. But they do also bring back a ton of all conference talent. They also added the likes of a Brandon Sorsby, for example, amongst other players. This roster is just head and shoulders, and it just provides the feeling that it's you win the Big 12 title again and or you make the college football playoff. Otherwise, this season is going to be viewed as a disappointment.
I mean, yeah, I would strongly advise anybody projecting or predicting potential Big 12 champions, if they look anywhere elsewhere other than Texas Tech for the Big 12, I would severely go against that. I think this is the clear favorite in the conference for the foreseeable future. I think a BYU is capable of getting to that same Texas Tech level, but just with the sheer force that they go into the transfer portal season with, the kind of players they're getting, the kind of teams they're outbidding for those players, I feel like they're definitely a mainstay at the top of this conference. I think we could see them go on a potential Clemson in the mid 2010s run in that conference and just win like 5 out of the next 7. I would not be surprised at all if that happens, just because they're getting talent at an elite level. They're rivaling teams like LSU and Indiana, who are, some of the biggest spenders in the portal. And there's really no going against that in the current college football landscape. You might have teams like a BYU who might be more schematically inclined than a Texas Tech. I definitely think the Texas Tech offense had its shortcomings last year. I think they addressed some of those shortcomings in getting a Brendan Sorsby and getting some of those weapons that they got to surround him with. But there, like I said, there's just no there's nobody bidding and buying players and buying their roster like a Texas Tech currently.
Yeah, and you want to talk about like the level of dominance, and it's not just that. I think they're head and shoulders above the rest of the conference. I mean, really, 2 from 5 would be the only teams that I would have, at least according to my model, where if they played Texas Tech on a neutral site field, they would be an underdog by a touchdown or less. But then, outside of that, Texas Tech would be either a favorite by at least a touchdown or even more than that. So it's not even just that Texas Tech is head and shoulders. I think there's truly only a handful of teams that can truly be competitive with a Texas Tech and actually have that expectation to be competitive going into the game, as long as both teams are equally healthy.
Yeah, and I mean, is it fair? Probably not. But if you're a Texas Tech booster, if you're a Texas Tech fan, if you're on the Texas Tech staff, you're not gonna play by the rules that aren't there for you.
Yep.
If they're letting you do it, go do it. Texas Tech is a team that's buying at a rate that is on the level of a national championship caliber team. So they definitely can get there. I think last year they had a national championship caliber defense. And if they can maintain that while adding, a better offense, not that their offense was bad necessarily, but it wasn't as good as the defense was, obviously, that
Yeah,
they can definitely get there.
Yeah, because I think it would be fair to say that this offense was an above average to like at times a good offense last year, but they didn't have the offensive pieces that they needed to compete with really the elite of college football, and we saw that in the quarterfinal game last year against Oregon, where in spite of everything that was going on with their offensive unit, their defense played a hell of a game, and that could have been a bloodbath, similar to what we saw in some other games that we saw in the college football playoff, but it wasn't, because this defense was so special last year. And I think the defense can play at a similar level. It's just, can the offense catch up so that we can see them either win a game, or even what could happen here is Texas Tech could be a legitimate national championship contender if Brandon Sorsby continues what he did the last couple of years at Cincinnati.
Yeah, there's no arguments for me there. It's definitely a matter of they got Shield Wood at defensive coordinator. I think they're going to be able to perform towards the top of the country on defense year in and year out. They haven't shown really any signs of weakness on that side of the ball. Like you said, against Oregon, they held their own for most of the game, even though their offense really didn't give them much to work with. So that gives me a ton of hope for them as a unit. I know year in and year out, it's hard, especially in the transfer portal era, to get those units to gel as much as they were in 2025. But I think with what we saw from them last year, that gives me a ton of confidence in this defense. And like you said, like I said, they just need it might be Brendan Sorsby. it might be Brendan Sorsby on offense that gets them there. They just need that spark. I was a big fan of Baron Morton. I thought he might have been a little underrated. I still think he might be a little underrated going into the NFL draft cycle. He's probably not going to get drafted in all honesty, but I definitely think there was stuff to work with there. But I think with what Brendan Sorsby gives you, I think with what some of the other pieces add to that offense, they definitely are going to take a step up, which makes them incredibly dangerous in 2026.
Yeah, and I don't even want to necessarily bash on like a Baron Morton because he was part of the reason why Texas Tech made as far as he did, but it was also evident that Baron Morton was certainly outmatched, and he had a really rough day, like in that Oregon game, missing some throws that normally he would make, and honestly, it would be throws uh, that Braden Sorsby would make more often than not too. So I do think that the quarterback position upgraded. Um, Again, it's one caveat I do want to say is that I think they do have the weakest Power Four schedules for Texas Tech. So if they come in with multiple losses and they also don't win the Big 12 championship, I mean, it doesn't matter how good they are on paper. They could be a team that's left out because I don't think they're going to get any benefit of the doubt from like a strength of schedule component.
No, especially if they don't win the championship game or if they don't make the championship game. I don't see that. I don't see any team in this conference having a shot at the CFP unless there's just a juggernaut. A 12-0 BYU loses to 12-0 Texas Tech, and then they might even play on their schedule, so it might not even be possible. I don't remember, but
Yeah.
in that scenario, that's possible. But I don't think that will happen. I don't think the third team that doesn't make the Big 12 championship game in the Big 12 will end up making the playoffs.
Yeah, and because I'm currently projecting candidly. I think the Big 12 is going to be like the ACC, and I think it's going to be a one bid league for this upcoming season. But I do think that like there's going to be a couple of teams in there, like a BYU or even like a Kansas State that could sneak in there, where you're looking at them and they have compelling cases at their own right, and they're going to wonder, man, like I wish we could find a way to make room for these teams without actually expanding the playoff because these two teams, they definitely prove that they are playoff caliber teams too, even though maybe their conference as a whole doesn't stack up to like a Big Ten or the SEC.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about this on prior streams, so I won't harp on it too long. But with the Notre Dame rule, it's definitely going to make Big 12. It's going to be harder for Big 12 schools, especially the Big 12 loser, to get in over what should be at least, I would imagine, at least a 10-win Notre Dame team who gets an automatic bid if they're in the top 12.
Yeah, which is it's interesting that you brought up Notre Dame because I think Notre Dame could have like the same issue as well if they lose multiple games, especially if they lose like the Miami and BYU, where there could be a more compelling case to leave them outside of the top 12 so that you don't have to worry about seeding them. But we could dive deeper into the like our playoff predictions at a little bit of a later time, and I'm gonna save that for another day. Colin, before we sign off here tonight, appreciate you joining me at the 11th hour, man. It's always a pleasure talking ball with you. Any final thoughts about the Big 12 before we sign off here tonight, man?
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I know it was last second, so I appreciate you being flexible. As for the Big 12, go out there. Somebody go out there. I want to see an Arizona State in 2024 again. I want to see something like that. UCF, go out and win 10 games. Colorado, go out and win 10 games. I want to see that again. I love the chaos of that. I love seeing that Arizona State team compete in the playoff. It's more than likely going to be a Texas Tech again, which they could be an Arizona State type team again, or probably even better. In all honesty, that could end up happening. It probably will end up happening. But I love the chaos of this conference. I just want to see more of it.
Yeah, I think we all do. I mean, I wanted this to be the like the People's Conference. Like the ACC was the People's Conference, and it was intriguing to see the ACC championship race play out the way that it did last year. But what the true People's Conference, like it's really the Big 12. Because in terms of the power conferences, I think, with the exception of the last couple of years, it's been the conference that we've seen the least disparity in resources between the top and the bottom. We'll see if the rest of the league can catch up to Texas Tech, as you mentioned. But for right now, I think it's Texas Tech to lose. But I still think there's a lot of really fun teams to watch that are going to be compelling TV appointments to be made throughout the regular season.
No, 100% agree. It's going to be a fun year. I think the middle of the pack of that conference, especially, is going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, for sure, and hopefully, my Cincinnati Bearcats can do something. But hey, with that being said, appreciate you guys sitting down and enjoying this Big 12 preview. You know, being joined by my co-host Colton over at O&O Sports, and that is his handle. Like not only on Twitter, but that's also his handle on YouTube. So make sure you go ahead and check his stuff out. He's got some really cool stuff on the social media platforms. One of these days, you'll even get a live video appearance. You know, the people aren't ready for like Colton's face to be plastered all over the like the college football red zone space. But you know, when that day comes, you know, that's going to be a groundbreaking day like as well. But in the meantime, man, Colton, really appreciate you coming in and joining me on the show. And for those of you that are watching, appreciate y'all watching. If you haven't done so yet, hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching on a different platform like Twitch or on Twitter, definitely like hit that follow button as well, because we post on multiple like social media platforms, like especially for the live shows. With that being said, this is Jake from College Football Red Zone signing off. I hope you guys are all out there having a good night. Take care, everybody.